Joining us, former senior spokesman for the Pentagon, the State Department, and White House, retired Rear Admiral John Kirby. He's an MS Now national security analyst. Director of Press Freedom Initiatives for the Washington Post, Jason Rezaian. Tim Miller, still with us. So on the issue of trust, Admiral, how do you negotiate when neither side trusts the other?
Yeah, it's certainly tough. I mean, look, the essence of diplomatic negotiations mean if you're in negotiations, you're probably across the table from somebody who you got issues with, and there's probably going to be a little bit of a lack of trust there, no doubt about it. But what you want to try to do, at least what I hope they're trying to do here, is find some small wins, what we would call confidence-building measures, small compromises that both sides could make to prove their sincerity and their willingness to negotiate in good faith and get them back to the table. Now, what those might be, I don't know, right? What I'm hearing from both sides are pretty maximalist preconditions. The Trump administration says the blockade's going to stay in place until you guys decide to open up the strait. The Iranians are saying we're not going to open up the strait, nor are we going to come to the table unless you end the blockade. That's pretty far apart. That's a pretty big gap there. I hope they're finding some small confidence-building measures that they can get to. But ultimately, it comes down to not trust, but the idea of verification. When we negotiated the Iran deal in the Obama administration, there was not a lot of trust either between the two sides, but they put in place verification, examination, testing, inspection regimes to make sure that both sides were meeting their obligations.
I guess part of it is both sides have to want something and have to need something, and there has to be some urgency there. Donald Trump obviously wants to end this. The Iranians probably don't want to continue to keep getting bombed. Are we at a place now from your perspective here, from what we can gather, where the urgency is the same, at the same level for both sides?
I think both sides want to find a way out. I think they're both looking for an exit ramp. But I think the Iranians are certainly going to play for time. They understand that the time component is more sensitive for Donald Trump than it is for them. And when you're dealing with a governing structure that even before the war, Katie, was not unified, was not monolithic, the IRGC have their own equities here at play, and now they're more empowered than they were before. So when you're dealing with a truly fractured governing structure, you're not just negotiating with the guy across the table. You're not sure who really has accountability and who can make the decisions that can be stood up. It makes it that much more difficult. And the IRGC has no intention and certainly no desire to end this anytime soon because they know the pain that time is causing the Trump administration. And I believe that they're going to do everything they can to try to drag this out.
And Jason, you're an expert on this as well. Do you see it the same way as the Admiral?
I do. I agree with my old friend Admiral Kirby on this one 100%. I think the other thing about it is that the Iranians have shown a willingness to sustain pain over a prolonged period of time. You just got to look back to the not-so-distant history of the 8-year war between Iran and Iraq. And there is a big division between the Iranian populace and the state. The IRGC and the rest of the regime is not really worried about the civilian damage that's being absorbed. They can take a lot more of it as far as they're concerned. And the Trump administration needs to get out of this as soon as possible. So I think that they're on two very different timelines. But I do agree that in the medium term, everybody wants a way out of this. The Iranian economy is in the gutter, and it's not going to get out of it anytime soon. And this is a bad situation that wasn't necessary, and one that I hope is resolvable. At the end of the day, though, if we're going to negotiate a deal with them that looks very similar to the JCPOA, but that ends up giving Iran a lot more in terms of financial relief, the missing piece of the puzzle from the JCPOA and now, although this war was started as a war of liberation, are the needs, desires, and freedom of Iranian people. That's not part of these conversations at all. But it was the reason that Donald Trump got us into the war. At least that's what he said.
How do you get to a disarmed Iran or a promise of no nukes for Iran if you don't have freedom for the people? How do you get there with the regime still in place or with the IRGC's version of the regime?
I think an unarmed Iran or a disarmed Iran and a non-nuclear armed Iran are two very different things. Iran is already very heavily armed. The state has a lot of munitions and military equipment. It's pretty outdated compared to what they're up against in this war, but it is certainly enough to suppress the people of that country and massacre them, as thousands of them were massacred just this January. But in terms of preventing a nuclear-armed Iran, it seems to me that, it's not my estimation of the situation. It's our own intelligence, Israeli intelligence, all the international intelligence. The JCPOA was working. The 2016 nuclear deal was working. We were adhering to it. They were adhering to it. We pulled out of it. The guardrails are now down. I think we could put them back up, but there'll be a steeper cost than there was to that first deal.
The pressures that the president is under, Tim, what are they right now?
Well, economic pressures. You obviously can tell that he's sensitive to this, and he went on Squawk Box on CNBC right before the market opened yesterday to try to jawbone the market into believing that he really wants an exit ramp and he really is planning on getting the Strait opened. So obviously you can tell that he's concerned about that. But he doesn't have control over it. He got us into something that he wasn't prepared for how to get us out of. This Washington Post story that was just dropped right before we came on here, Katie, that says that experts are assessing that it might take 6 months to clear the Strait of mines, even if they were to open it. And so that would mean limited number of ships that can go through, and it would mean disruptions, supply chain disruptions, oil disruptions, maybe oil shortages, depending on how long this goes. That is why, the main negotiating point right now is not over, as Jason said, what the president said his original goal was regime change and helping the protesters and the Iranian people. But now the goal seems to be opening the Strait, which is something that was already open when the war started.
The polling on this, Tim, has never been good. It gets worse by the day. His polling is hitting new lows. How much of that do you suspect is actually getting into the White House, getting to the president, or is he still being buffered from this? Is this still being hidden from him, and is he given, like a Rasmussen poll or something, or a Gateway Pundit poll that says how wonderful he is?
I think he's being buffered by it. I don't have the closest White House sources these days, but there was somebody as a blind quote the other day was talking about how you wouldn't believe how much time he spends looking at AI videos of himself on Truth Social. So whether or not that's true, kind of a too good to check anecdote. But I think that he's getting a lot of positive news fed to him. I think the people around him are giving him a lot of positive news. That's the nature of the type of team that he had around for Trump 2.0. But eventually reality just breaks through. And I think that his numbers are getting so low because there are big parts of, the core part of the base might still, go down with the Trump train no matter what happens. But a lot of the folks that voted for him in the last election, voted for him for two issues. One, they were concerned about inflation, and two, they didn't want to get into stupid wars. And now he's doing the opposite on both of them. So it's not that big of a surprise that his numbers are tanking.
Jason, there are hostages still within Iran, American hostages. What can you tell us about them?
We know that there are at least 6 Americans currently being unjustly detained, I would say being held hostage. Several of those cases are public. Others are still lesser known because the families are concerned about the safety and well-being of their loved ones who are being held. I would say that going back to an earlier point that Admiral Kirby made, if you're looking for trust-building measures, the practice of the Islamic Republic of taking Americans and hostages of other democratic countries goes back to 1979. It's something that's vexed our Iran policy throughout the 47-year history of that regime. Let's test that out. Let's see if we can get these people home as a trust-building measure. It's something that should be floated right now ahead of the first round of the negotiations in Islamabad. I know that it was raised in those talks, and it was publicly talked about that we will work on this. The Trump administration, for all of its flaws, has shown a commitment to bringing American citizens home who are wrongly detained or held hostage abroad. But one blind spot is dual national Iranian Americans, just like me. I'm fortunate the Obama administration put a lot of effort into bringing me home. The Biden administration brought several Iranian American home. The Trump administration has never brought an Iranian American home. I'd like to see that change right now.